There are two things that attracted me to this watch initially. First, the case. It is quite unusually elegant, should I say. And second thing that got me seriously interested in this watch was the price. A very low price indeed. Sure, for such a low price we are not gonna get any serious specs here. Or so I thought. Was I wrong? Well, we have it here. Let's find out. Hello and welcome back. Well, yes, we have a few things to unpack here. First, of course, the specs and the price, and we will get to it right away. However, once I pulled the trigger and paid for this really good-looking chronograph, I took pause and then started my research. You see, if you are familiar with Pagani Design, you probably know by now that they do a lot of things pretty well, except for the actual design. In other words, if we have such a good-looking watch, it is most likely a homage. And sure enough, after a bit of clicking about on the interweb, I had my answer, which of course will be revealed at the end of this video, or you can just skip to the end and have a look for yourself. So I did say the price was really sharp, $46 to be precise. Usually it is kinda a threshold when we start seeing some level of compromises in specs and materials, like replacement of sapphire crystal for a cheaper mineral one, or usage of chip movement, or something else in those lines. So let's see what corners did Pagani Design cut to get to this price point. Dimensions. So, right, we have 41mm case diameter, case height is 13.5mm, well, not particularly small, but not over the top either. We have 20mm lug width, lug tip to lug tip distance is just over 51mm. However, because of the pointy lug tips, the effective lug to lug distance is closer to 49.5mm. This is quite compact and should allow this timepiece, in theory, to work on more wrist sizes than the 41mm case diameter suggests. We will of course have a look how this watch wears on my about 7-inch wrist and on a 6.25-inch wrist later in this video. The supplied strap will cover wrists up to 8.25-inch, and as supplied, this watch weighs 78 grams. Nice and light despite its prominent proportions. Movement. Okay, I did read the product listings before purchasing this watch, and it did say VK63, which is Seiko's reputable mecha-quartz chronograph movement, but at this price point you can't blame me for having certain doubts. Okay, Pagani Design are usually true to their specs, but still I wanted to see for myself, and yes, sure enough, we have Seiko VK63 here with a mechanical flyback chronograph module integrated with a quartz movement. And among other benefits of these movements, like quartz level accuracy and solid Seiko's reputation behind it, we also have around 3 years of battery life. So, a very good option for our chronograph here. Case. This is arguably the star of the show. The design of this case is quite exceptional. Okay, Pagani Design didn't do much designing here, as I found out, however, the execution is still very good, especially considering the price point. We have a fully stainless steel case construction, working our way from the top. We have a fixed bevel bezel. The bevel is mirror polished while the rest of the bezel is brushed. The case does have somewhat unusual build, basically an assembly of 3 main parts. Bezel on top, a round core in the middle, and the thin plate at the base. The brushed surfaces of all these 3 parts of the case are tastefully interrupted by high-polished bevels in between. And then we have quite intricately sculpted lugs attached to the bezel and the base of the case, completing this very interesting, elegant case design. The lugs look like the arches of a miniature bridge, like they were crafted by an urban architect rather than horology designer. The straps are attached using screws, which is also a somewhat unusual design decision and complements the overall premium look of this case. And also screws make strap changing quite easy as long as we have 1mm screwdriver handy. On the right hand side of the case we have unguarded push-pull crown and square chronograph pushers. The sign crown also has a somewhat unusual grip profile, which complements the rest of the design of this case. Turning the case around and we are presented with flat caseback, which is secured by 5 screws. Now, a word of caution here, Pagani Design somewhat optimistically declared 100 meters of water resistance on this watch, which kinda assumes that we can possibly even dip this watch in water. Personally, I'm not as optimistic, and with push-pull crown, chronograph pushes with no locking mechanism and with a screw-on back case, I wouldn't get this watch anywhere near the water. Okay, maybe an occasional splash, that is, we should be okay washing our hands while wearing it, but that's about it. Right, well, this is where I believe we find the first little compromise. Okay, first of course we need to check for sapphire, and the good news is that we do have a double dome sapphire crystal here. Considering the price point, it is really good. Now, the compromise that I've just mentioned comes in the form of a very little, if any, anti-reflective coating. The thing is that it does not impact the legibility all that much, so from practicality perspective it is quite acceptable. However, a better anti-reflective coating would have allowed us a better view of this dial, which is actually done really nicely, as we will see now when we'll look at it in more detail. Dial has a rich blue background, we have a tachometer scale on the perimeter which is applied and also has an ever so slightly lighter shade of blue. The baton style hour markers are also applied, and so is the 12 o'clock Arabic numeral at the top of the dial. The three sub-dials are slightly recessed and each has a thin, high-polished framing, as well as a very subtle circular pattern which gives a sub-dials a sunburst effect when light hits it at certain angles. So we have effectively a three-layer dial. We have a neatly cut out date window at 4:30 position, and in regards to sub-dial functionality, the sub-dial at 6 o'clock is a running seconds indicator, the sub-dial at 9 o'clock position is a 16 minutes chronograph accumulator, and the sub-dial at 3 o'clock position is 24-hour indicator, arguably the least useful of three sub-dials, that is, unless we're stuck in a cave for more than a day, or live somewhere behind Earth's polar circle where the day or night can last for half a year. We have a button-style minute and hour hands complementing the hour indices and quite distinctive needle second hand with a small ring counterbalance. We have a printed logo under 12 o'clock marker, and in general the dial is done really well. However, the poor anti-reflective property of the crystal does somewhat let this dial down. Thankfully, because of a good contrast of the stainless steel hands and hour markers on the dark blue dial background, the legibility of this watch is pretty good. And we even have some lume, which definitely is not that impressive, but still is a pleasant surprise on this dress watch / sport racing chronograph. Bracelet. Like the rest of this timepiece, the supplied leather strap is also somewhat unusual. It is a double-sided strap with nylon-type canvas on the outside and leather on the inside. We have a subtle padding closer to the case, and the stitching is pretty good too. However, the strap is a bit stiff, at least from new, and will definitely require some breaking in. We have two keepers and a good milled side buckle. Actually, the buckle is very well sculpted, including a groove to reduce a strap bending and hopefully prolonging strap lifespan as such. And of course, being a 20mm strap, there are tons of aftermarket options to replace it, if we so desire. And in regards to how it wears, well, it is a prominent chronograph with a lug-to-lug distance of about 50mm, so I would recommend it for wrist sizes of 6 inches and up. This watch is somewhat a cross between dress watch and a sports chronograph, and while we would expect more compact sizing in case of a dress watch, being a sports chronograph allows for much more prominent proportions, and that's exactly what we have here. And here is how this watch wears on a 6¼ wrist. And it looks almost doable. Okay, you probably will need to make an additional hole in the strap or replace the strap altogether for a nice and snug fit. Verdict, and whose homage is it anyway? Okay, before I share my verdict, I need to share the results of my research, so unless you already figured this one out, we have here a pretty good homage to a very popular Audemars Piguet chronograph code 1159 that Audemars Piguet released in 2019. And for the record, AP chronograph has very similar dimensions to this chronograph that we have here, or vice versa, whichever way you look at it. So in terms of wearability, Pagani Design didn't make this watch less or more wearable on the wrist than the timepiece that they drew their inspiration from. And now, in terms of negatives, well, one thing that stood out for me, as I mentioned earlier, a really lousy anti-reflective coating on this otherwise really nice double dome sapphire crystal. Yes, it kind of spoils the view of this lovely, really well executed dial, especially in low light or under bright sunshine. And the second thing is rather an observation. I think the crown could be recessed into the case a little bit more. Not a deal breaker, but it would be nicer if it was a little bit closer to the case. Other than that, we have a full package here with really well sculpted full stainless steel case, sapphire crystal, decent strap, and with Japanese Seiko mecha quartz movement in the back, and all that for $46 US. Makes this timepiece a very compelling buy if you are after a sporty racing chronograph with a really distinct looks. What are your thoughts? Do let us know in the comments. And for more mecha quartz and mechanical chronographs, check out my playlist over here. And for all other great value watches, I will leave a link on the screen over here. And if you find this review helpful, do give us a like and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already done so. And as always, thank you for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.